Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus appeared to the 11 and said to them, "Go into the whole world and proclaim the gospel to every creature. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. These signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak new languages. They will pick up serpents with their hands. And if they drink any deadly thing, it will not harm them. They will lay hands on the sick, and they will recover." Then the Lord Jesus, after he spoke to them, was taken up into heaven and took his seat at the right hand of God. But they went forth and preached everywhere, while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the word through accompanying signs. The Gospel of the Lord. Today is the Feast of St. Mark, and on the Feast of St. Mark, ask a Bible trivia question. You have a 50% chance of getting this correct, all right? A true or false question. St. Mark was one of the original 12 disciples with Jesus. True or false? False is correct. Very good, all right? You guys can hold your heads up high. All right, very good. Yeah, so of the four gospel writers, right, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, two of them were first-hand witnesses, right? Two of them were disciples of Jesus. The two were Matthew and John. Mark and Luke are not disciples of Jesus, but rather disciples of Jesus. So St. Mark was a disciple of St. Peter. The tradition of the church says that basically when Peter was in Rome, he was a fisherman, right? So he wasn't very highly educated. So we needed a translator and a scribe. And the tradition of the church is that Mark was his translator and his scribe. Some people also think that Mark, his mother, was where the disciples had the Last Supper in the upper room, but that's a much more debated idea. But basically what we know about Mark is that he grew up in Jerusalem and was a Levite. So he came from a priestly family. So he would have been very familiar with the liturgy of the temple and also with the scriptures, make him a very good scribe for St. Peter. Does anybody know who Luke was a disciple of? Paul, very good. Man, you were studying up this morning. I'm impressed. All right, very good. So Luke was a disciple of Paul. We also hear about St. Mark from the Acts of the Apostles. Oftentimes he is referred to as John Mark, right? Basically having two names. Right? So sometimes he's referred to in that way. We know that Mark was not only Peter's scribe and translator, but he was considered a very close friend to Peter. Peter says in his first letter that Mark is his son. Obviously, Mark was not his biological son, but Peter considered him so close to him that he called him his son. This is one of the many times in the New Testament where we know that, one of the big things that come up in Catholic and Protestant debates is people say, why do Catholics call priests father? Right? Jesus explicitly condemns it, and yet all throughout the New Testament, St. Paul refers to people as his spiritual sons, and likewise here, St. Peter refers to Mark as his son. Presumably, Mark would refer to him as his spiritual father. Right? What else do we know about St. Mark? It kind of depends on which historian you talk to, because many modern historians are very skeptical, right, of early church traditions. But basically, we know that Mark was a martyr, and the tradition says that he was a bishop in Egypt. So the Coptic Christians who are living in Egypt, who sometimes you'll hear about in the news because they often experience persecution living in Egypt, right? They trace their lineage back to St. Mark. Supposedly, St. Mark ended his life as the bishop of Alexandria in Egypt, and so he has a great legacy there. So on the Feast of St. Mark, it's always a good idea to pray for the Coptic Christians, right, living in Egypt who often experience persecution